Hi, and welcome to On the Spectrum. I'm Larry Walters, and I'll be your host. Today we welcome as our special guest Dr. Peter Radasch. Dr. Radasch is a specialist in behavioral health and works extensively with those on the spectrum. His firm is called Applied Behavior Sciences, and I think you'll find him in West Hartford and in Cheshire. Today we're going to have a very informative topic on how to develop effective and safe social connections and why that's important to those in the spectrum. We'll also cover some of the challenges and also some of the ways to overcome them. So with that, let me welcome Dr. Radasch. Thank you for coming and welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me, Larry.
Good. Dr. Radasch, I know you've been on the show before, and we appreciate that. Mm-hmm. But for those who are just joining us, why don't you take a moment and tell us a little bit about your background and the focus of your practice?
Well, I do a lot of work, and the clinicians at Applied Behavioral Sciences do a lot of work with people with developmental disabilities, those with intellectual disabilities and those with autism as well. We do assessment, we do individual treatment. I run a number of social skills groups, and I got my entry into this particular specialty through my work with the Department of Developmental Services and working with those with intellectual disabilities. Several years ago, about 7 or 8 years ago, they developed a pilot program for people to serve people with autism through the Department of Developmental Services. Mm-hmm. And through that pilot program, I had more and more exposure to people with autism and have started to fulfill some of the need of that population through our company and through certainly referrals to other clinicians as well.
What do you find are some of the most effective things you're doing working with those on the spectrum?
I would say that I think the most robust treatment for people on the autism spectrum is the social group modality. The individual gets an enormous amount of peer feedback. Mm. There's opportunities to do role play. A lot of the social anxiety that people on the spectrum often encounter can be overcome almost in an exposure way as they show up and become increasingly comfortable sitting with a group of their peers. Peer modeling is a very helpful aspect of the of a social skills group, and we develop through the groups, we are able to help them learn the kinds of skills that they're going to need in ordinary social interactions. So conversation skills, for example. What do you talk about? A lot of the people
right.
come and when they first meet with me, particularly in a group, they say, well, even before the group starts, Dr. Radasch, I don't even know what to say. What do I say? Right. So there's very fundamental education around topics, appropriate topics of conversation, trying to find common ground through common interests, hobbies, and things of that sort.
It's very difficult for them to have social connections, isn't it?
They struggle with it greatly for a lot of different reasons. One, they have social anxiety. Two, some people on the spectrum have more difficulty with expressive communication. So when they encounter face-to-face interaction, they sometimes freeze up. They don't know what to say, and they don't have a lot of experience. Often they've experienced bullying, and they've been kind of excluded from social groups. They've kind of often found themselves in the out group. So they have a limited experience of successful interpersonal relationships, and they carry that with them. And the social skills group is a nice, rich format for them to develop the skills and to feel like they are in the group and not necessarily in an out group.
So is it limited to these social groups, or are there other ways to build effective social connections?
There are, I think, a very robust way of helping individuals with autism develop social skills is usually they come through a psychologist or a licensed clinical social worker, some kind of therapist, and the therapist is feeling like the client is ready to take the next step in their social development. They may refer them to a group If they're not ready for a social skills group, Larry, they'll the individual therapist might work with them, and they often might introduce a paraprofessional. And the advantage of a paraprofessional is that they don't have a license. They have experience in mediating social interaction. They often have other clients with whom they're working, and they can pool together some of their clients on the autism spectrum and go out on group outings. And that, like in a community mentor role, they can facilitate conversation, they can facilitate interaction, they can help one another get their respective contact information. The kind of things that people developing relationships might not give much of a passing thought to, but that kind of intuitive sense as to how to make that connection and how to continue that connection is often not there. So the community mentor can be a very rich resource, and working collaboratively with the therapist can identify particular areas that the community mentor can really focus in on and help the client learn.
So it sounds like there's a couple of different things here. There's the paraprofessional, and then there's the community mentor. And I think when I think of paraprofessional, I think of someone who's typically in the school setting. Now, but it sounds like you're looking at a more expansive role for that. Maybe you could spin that out a little bit for us.
Well, maybe I'm using the term loosely. I look at the community mentor, which is one resource to the autism community, and the life skills coach as another important resource to the autism community in teaching a different set of skills, which we can talk about more later.
Well, let's take that. Let's take the life skills coach. What do they typically do, and how do they help those in the spectrum?
Well, again, it depends on what stage, what age, where the individual is at developmentally. So I work primarily with late adolescents and young adults, all the way. Some of the members of my social skills groups are in their 40s and even 50s.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yep. So a life skills coach working with someone in their 50s, the work that they're going to do is likely to be very different than the kind of work that they would do with someone who's 18, 19, 20, maybe just having moved out of their home. But they work on the kinds of skills, help the individuals with autism develop the kinds of skills that they're going to need in order to live independently, or certainly a more independent life. So cooking, laundry, budgeting, bill paying. They often can be a very valuable resource for young adults who are just moving out, establishing their own independent residence. Life skills coaches can be hired for 3-hour blocks, 4-hour blocks, however often they might be needed, but one might be at the end of the month at the time that it's necessary to pay bills. Life skills coaches can teach the client with autism how to use some of the technology features on an iPhone, for example. Those kinds of reminders. The other challenges that people with autism sometimes struggle with is attention, concentration, forgetfulness, and there's certain important things that need to be remembered, like taking medicine. All those kinds of things that an adult living independently needs to know how to do. Again, cooking, filling out applications
for work,
or even renewing application processes to maintain benefits. That's where people often get. They often encounter difficulty.
That's difficult for anybody.
Well, I know that even remembering to change the oil in a car can be an issue that needs to be followed up on. And a life skills coach can be, they can address the kinds of things that the people in that individual's life will bring to their attention. Say, make sure that you work on this, this, and this, and then the life skills coach can do that. And then work collaboratively with the individual therapist as the individual therapist might be needed. But ideally, once those skills are developed, the individual therapist might not be needed. If they've got the social supports, and they've got the life skills coaches, and there's some sense that anxiety or depression might be increasing, then a referral back to the therapist could could be made.
So you work hand in hand with them all the time?
Ideally, we work collaboratively, and sometimes we, with the families and the individual with autism and the life skills coach and the community mentor, so that everybody is playing from the same book.
Do you find that the life skills coach are those services generally rendered one-on-one with the client, or does that life skills coach also go into work settings or school or social settings with the client?
That's a good question. In a workplace setting, the title that's used is a job coach.
Right.
And through some of the agencies that help people on the autism spectrum get and then keep gainful employment, a job coach might be an important person in that process. Certain levels of need. Someone might need more job coaching, someone might need less job coaching, but a good coach and a good community mentor and a good life skills coach are essentially working to put themselves out of work. As the individual develops the skill, the supports and the instruction gradually is faded. And there's a hitch there, and that's where I think the professionals, the psychologists or the licensed clinical social workers can say, okay, so what is the taper plan? What are you doing now to make the dependence on this support less,
Gotcha.
As opposed to just maintaining, they're not paid professional friends. They are trying to facilitate friendships and relationships so that they're less needed.
I can see that the role of the life skills coach can be very important, and I would imagine there's got to be good chemistry with the client. How do you go about finding the right person and evaluating them?
I had a conversation earlier today about that very issue. Finding the right person, the right fit, can be as fundamental as the right gender for this particular client. Are they going to work more effectively with a same gender coach, or would someone of a opposite sex be more helpful?
Right.
The age, sometimes the 23, 24, 25-year-old client with autism won't respond as comfortably with the same age coach. They might feel like, we're the same age. Why wouldn't I be learning from someone older, wiser, more, a generation removed, or what it is? But finding that right fit is really important. Sometimes it's a community mentor who has similar interests. They may, it could be something as basic as rooting for the same sports team. It could be, it would be great if in a life skills coaching format, if the client needed to learn how to cook and the life skills coach had some kind of culinary training or really enjoyed cooking, so the kind of natural enthusiasm.
A real fit.
It doesn't have to be, there's no kind of make-believe that I'm really interested in cooking. It's something I love to do. It's, I have a passion for it. So those are the kinds of things that you want to find.
There's a lot to look for. I mean, expertise, the right fit, sort of, common interests. What would a client be looking to pay? What's the expected rate for a good life skills coach?
Well, agencies charge, I don't know the exact figure.
A range, perhaps?
I think agencies charge anywhere from $25 an hour to maybe $50 an hour, somewhere in that range. The established providers, some of whom I work directly with, where they this is what they do, this is their business. They're college educated, and they've got experience working with people on the autism spectrum. They will identify their own pay rate, and sometimes it might be I think they book hourly, as you would imagine. I think if you book 3 hours, you might get a cheaper hourly rate than you would if you book an hour.
Right.
Just the logistics of that are such that it lends itself to that.
And as you said before, the nice thing is that they can pick and choose. They don't have to use the person all the time. They can use them at critical times, filing applications, filling out forms, perhaps maybe tax time, things like that. So
Sure.
it could be a real opportunity to use them on a specialized basis. Good, good. Now you mentioned also this community mentor. So just so we understand, is a community mentor the same as the paraprofessional life skills coach, or are they different? And if so, how do they differ?
They're very different roles. They are often, for logistics purposes, a life skills coach may often provide community mentoring. But they are two very distinct roles, and I know that there are educational criteria differences in the life skills coach. At least with the agencies, a life skills coach needs to have a college degree, and a community mentor does not.
What are some of the ways that the community mentor may differ from the life skills coach in their
Well,
in their
the community mentor's role is less in terms of teaching the skill set to have an individual function independently,
right.
And more to facilitate social interaction. It could be, learning how to interact with a store clerk, for example. People who have, are just kind of starting out with learning how people operate in the community at large, whether it's appropriate conduct at a bus stop, for example, or appropriate
or a restaurant,
or a restaurant, or appropriate degree of communication in an elevator. The kinds of places where lots of people might find themselves uncomfortable with just coworkers in general.
To understand the social norms.
Social norms, kind of expectations, realistic expectations. That I've worked with people who thought that shopping in a supermarket would be a good place to make friends. Community mentors are going to work with a client, teach them appropriate places. And places that are more conducive to developing those social kinds of connections, whether it's like a bowling league or a book club or some kind of repeat activity where the acquaintance, people will first become acquaintances, and then a degree of familiarity might develop. Then the exchange of contact information might be made, and then a plan, if they find some common interest, a plan to do something. Can be generated from that.
I understand that some of these social connections can be made online now. There are websites like Meetup and things. Have you found those to be effective?
Well, some of my clients, I'm always learning. The people I work with are bringing new things to my attention all the time. Right. And I've had a number of clients who have had success with Meetup.com as a way to meet new people. In new settings with common interests. The initial response to internet-based or social media-based friendship development is, oh my gosh, Dr. Radasch, what are you doing? We've taught our son for 15 years about the risks of strangers and dealing with strangers. Right. But that, Larry, is where the use of a community mentor can come in very, very handy. So that rather than they can look to some areas that they might be interested in, particular hobbies, and rather than going cold and showing up at some site, usually it's a public site. I know that there are IHOP sometimes has it's like a games night social that's held at IHOP on a weekly basis.
Oh, nice.
There's different places in the community, but to meet new people who are looking to meet others as well. Safely, the individual can find a particular interest, a particular place where this group is going to meet, and then go with someone so they don't have to run the risks of a potential situation where they may be exploited or there may be some kind of risk involved. Right. We don't want that, obviously.
Now, also, it sounds like a person on the spectrum could benefit from both a life skills coach and a community mentor. Would this be something that they'd be paying privately for each of these groups, or would there be additional help somehow on on a state basis?
Well, I know that right now the services that are being provided for by the Department of Developmental Services are full.
I see, right.
There's a waiting list for to access those kinds of supports. Community mentors, because there's less of an educational requirement, sometimes are less expensive than life skills coaches, but they often will charge the same rate because it's hour for hour, and the people who do this work privately are very experienced. They've got a lot of experience working with clients on the autism spectrum, not only in a life skills role, but also facilitating interaction with other peers on the spectrum.
Right. Now, certainly getting to these social groups, I think, can be a challenge. Transportation, is this something you're seeing?
Transportation is a huge issue. They have, certain agencies will provide transportation training. I know the Kennedy Center is one where they will teach a client how to use a bus or how to use a train or other methods of public transportation. And but life skills coaches can, again, if they're working with a family and you've got someone who lives on or near a public bus line, I just made a referral very recently for that very purpose, that you don't have to go through the agencies. And again, if you go through the agency, it might be more expensive than if you go through someone who provides this service kind of as needed. Again, if 6 hours are needed, or the person you've originally contracted for 6 hours, but the person seems to have really mastered the skill, and a little bit of supplemental practice by the parents or an older sibling or some relation is enough to kind of take them to that place of mastery. Again, we're always working, Larry, towards tapering the supports.
Right.
We don't want someone to just ride the bus with the client. We want them to teach the client how to ride the bus so they can ride the bus alone.
Right.
And that's key.
And there's some other services too. Dial-A-Ride, I think. Myra, have you heard?
I know some towns, and I know this from some of the work that I've done with clientele who reside in nursing facilities or assisted living facilities. Some towns provide a service called Dial-A-Ride where they will. It's not the most convenient. They'll give you a set of times in which they're going to show up. You don't really know exactly how many other people they might pick up on the way to wherever it is that you're going. So if you're going to a movie, you
may be late.
Well, you might be very early, and then you might be coming home quite a bit after the movie ends, depending on that availability. But again, it's for people who are really eager for social interaction. There is a way that, in some towns this is a resource that exists, in other towns it may not be available. But for those who are really working at socializing on an independent level, that's something that they can do, and they don't need someone to drive them. But community mentors and transportation is a huge issue, because so many people with whom we work don't have their driver's license, or have reasons why they were unable to get their driver's license, whether it was anxiety or just too much difficulty navigating the kind of visual, spatial world with fine motor issues. There's a lot to pull together just to drive an automobile.
So there's no Uber for those on the spectrum yet?
Well, I'm not real familiar with Uber yet, but that would be great. And I suspect that there will probably be some kind of carve-out coming down the road.
Right.
Yeah.
Good, good. If someone wanted to learn more about this and to learn more about developing these social connections that are safe and effective, is there a website that they could turn to, or perhaps a phone number they could call?
I think whenever you're working with people on the autism spectrum, you certainly want to be cautious. You want to be conservative. I don't really know of a website in particular where people can go and develop those kinds of connections. And I know the ASRC, the Autism Spectrum Resource Center in Wallingford, is a super rich resource for people on the spectrum. I know that they provide lots of social functions. They're often coordinating games night. and movie night, and they really, it's a very rich resource, and the autism community is lucky to have them. I know that some of these life skills coaches, community mentors who do this privately will often send out emails to the autism community announcing that they themselves are having a meet and greet. I know when I know that one of my associates, she does a lot of social skills groups as well. We're planning on a larger scale meet and greet with her groups and my groups, and we do that a couple of times a year. And we encourage the members who attend our social skills groups to invite friends, so that there's, again, additional opportunities for people to meet new people, make connections. And we've been doing this long enough so that some of the people kind of know each other from previous meet and greets. And then there's a kind of a, and Larry, it's nice when you see, when we take the Bolorama on the Berlin Turnpike by storm and 60 people on the Autism Spectrum show up, and we're all bowling and having conversation, you wouldn't know that anybody had autism.
Oh, it's wonderful.
You just wouldn't, and that's really kind of what we're looking for.
Oh, that's great.
That's what we're looking to cultivate, in various stages of our work.
Sounds very effective. Dr. Radasch, any other concluding thoughts that you'd like to share today?
It's great work. It's great work. I think that as the community in Connecticut, it's a well-educated consumer. Well-educated consumers. We have lots of resources here. I think the use of life skills coaches and community mentors, perhaps job coaches, is I think more and more people are recognizing what a rich resource this is, and how much more affordable it can be than simply working on a one-on-one basis with a licensed clinical psychologist or social worker.
Oh, great suggestions. I think that's an excellent way to approach it. Well, thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Great discussion.
Thanks, Larry.
And thank you very much for joining us today and hearing from Dr. Radasch about ways to build effective and safe social connections, the challenges that are often present with that, and how to overcome them. We also want to thank our friends at ASRC, the help and the support they provide to us. And we hope you join us again next time at a future show. So from all of us here on the Spectrum, thanks for watching, and goodbye.
This morning on an early grave, I'm ready to say goodbye. Nothing left to say. Time just to try not to spend. All I wanted is I've heard all of this. Wanted it. All of this. I'm hurting. All of this. I've been a loser all my life, and now I'm about to change. Feeling like it doesn't go about a major scene. Any woman on the planet who could do with this. All I wanted is I've heard all of this. Wanted it, all of this. I'm hating all of this, all of this, all of this. I wonder why I had my love running some days, and why am I keeping it?